Once again, my name is Shumi Pango from the Department of Science and Innovation. I am responsible for legislation and policies on IKS. And today we are going to be focusing on the biocultural protocols. But before I do that, I would like us to get a glimpse of a background on the IK Act that was signed into a law in August 2019. And I'm just going to take you through the main focus of the Act, which then dovetails to the work that we are doing on biocultural protocols. The Act addresses a few issues, if not many issues, that are the problem statements in the landscape of Indigenous knowledge. The first and the most important one is the biopiracy. For the longest time, the communities have been subjected to biopiracy, where third parties would access the communities, get information, and get whatever they want, including in knowledge associated with the resource, without any acknowledgement of the source, without any benefits accruing to the communities. The second part is addressing issues of misappropriation. And I want to clarify the three issues that happens around misappropriation. The first one is where the third party would use without getting authority and getting approval from the communities. They would use their knowledge, including their traditional cultural expressions, and misrepresent them in a way that undermines the communities. The Act seeks to address that. The second bit that happens with misappropriation is when there is an activity that is happening in that community that involves the third party. And in the first case, there is a benefit sharing that has been concluded by the two parties, but there is no fair and equitable sharing of benefits. That constitutes misappropriation. And the third one is a situation or a scenario where there is no benefit sharing agreement in place. And the third party is exploiting the communities for their own selfish benefit. And I want to stress this, that it has been a global phenomenon. Like-minded countries have suffered this biopiracy and misappropriation. And when you look at the history of Africa and South Africa, for the longest time, South Africa has been position 3, which they lost in the previous year or two, as one of the mega biodiverse countries in the world. And the knowledge associated with all of that resides with the communities. And when you look at the economic development in the communities, we don't have anything to show. And therefore, this Act seeks to address those issues so that if there's any access to the communities, then there are benefit sharing agreements in place. In fact, all legal prescripts that are required are in place before any activity can take place. The Act promotes registration of Indigenous knowledge. And in our experience, we have seen situations where the third party really want to know which community has a claim on what knowledge or on what resource associated with the knowledge. But they don't know where the communities are. We will regard that as a genuine excuse or a genuine reason. Now, the Act registers now the communities. It promotes this registration of knowledge so that the third party doesn't have to go around looking for communities. Everything now is going to be in that registration system where the claims of the communities will be documented there. The resources that they have, everything will be in that system. So the issue of not knowing where the communities are will be a thing of the past. And the other issue that the Act is focusing on is the benefit sharing for communities. I think I have touched on that. It is very important that we change the status quo of the communities. They must benefit from their knowledge. They must benefit from the access to their communities, to their resources, and to their knowledge. It also facilitates research and development. I want to allay the fears of researchers and industry that this Act has no intention of stifling research. In fact, the opposite is true. The Act seeks to facilitate research and development because the end goal is to have new product development. The Act also creates mechanisms for dispute resolution for communities. And I know for a fact that once we talk of benefit sharing, there's going to be a lot of disputes that arise. Some will start from within the communities. Other communities may feel that they are more of custodians and owners of the knowledge than others. And now the Act has put together mechanisms on how to deal with those disputes. The disputes might arise between the communities and the third parties. The disputes might arise as a result of the resource and knowledge associated with it spanning over different countries. And the Act addresses the issue of trans-border arrangements. This is just a snapshot and a background of why then it is important for us to have these biocultural protocols in place. Because if there are no biocultural protocols, biopiracy will persist. If there are no biocultural protocols, misappropriation and everything that I've mentioned will persist. And therefore, it is imperative for us to make sure that before the regulations are in place, the biocultural protocols are also in place. Or at least we have started the process of developing, of assisting communities to develop biocultural protocols. And I also want to stress the fact that government or DSI does not develop biocultural protocols for communities. They only facilitate the process. It must be an interactive and participatory process done by the communities themselves. Now, coming back to the issue of today, the biocultural protocols and making sense of biocultural protocols. What are these biocultural protocols? They are instruments that are set out as conditions to government, and strategically we started with government because government also is not immune in doing all these things that are mentioned as trying to be curbed by the IK Act. It sets out conditions for government, private sector, research, nonprofit sectors who engage with indigenous and local communities. And as I mentioned, they are developed through participatory decision-making process that is based on communities' customary norms, values, and laws. We need to acknowledge that the communities don't exist in a vacuum, and communities have been there since time immemorial. They have their own preferred ways of doing things, which is embedded in their customary rules and procedures. which are also known as protocols. And all of these, they regulate conduct and interactions between the communities and any other person outside the community, which in this case would be your third party. And these protocols form a very important part of customary law and are codified in many different ways, such as traditional folklore, traditional cultural expressions, dances, carvings, and designs. As a result, because these communities own a very important body of knowledge, there is a growing recognition of their potential, which can be explored positively by others. And for the others to be able to engage with these communities, they need to understand how the communities want to engage with the third parties. In other words, this should be a fair activity between the communities and the third parties without any actions of bullying and intimidation. And this is also intended to give a constructive dialogue and collaboration to support communities' plans and priorities in locally appropriate ways, in ways that are defined by the communities themselves. In other words, this whole process is giving a new set of rights to the communities or for the communities to either grant or deny access to their resources and to their communities. The elements of the biocultural protocol includes the ways of life of the communities, including their links between culture, spirituality, and customary laws and values. Their rights, responsibilities, and the duties of communities according to customary, national, and international law. And as I indicated, the communities don't exist in a vacuum. So they are also part of the global village. There are international laws that also affect the communities. So the conditions set out by the community for granting access for their lands, resources, and knowledge, such procedures for free, prior, and informed consent. In other words, the communities must be granted an opportunity to grant access or deny access to their communities. Now, the most important functions of the biocultural protocols is that, firstly, they bridge the gap between the customary laws and institutions of communities in one hand, and national or international frameworks for management of natural resources, such as the access and benefit sharing, which is an international instrument, and the reducing emissions from deforestation and degradation, which has since been amended into REDD+, and protected areas of forest policies. So this gap, these two systems must coexist. It should not be a case of us and them. We should bridge then this gap on the community's customary laws and the international frameworks. This also provides clarity and measure of legal certainty for users of resource. In other words, this is by no means trying to, as indicated, stifle research. This is intended to create legal certainty for the users as well, so that at some point they are not blamed for stealing knowledge from the communities or of not benefiting with the communities on the economic benefits that accrue out of the activities. And all of this must be done in a transparent way, in a way that has legal certainty for both users and the communities. It also triggers a community discussion on their aspirations and enhance awareness about the community's values and rights and obligations. The communities are sitting there in the wealth of knowledge, some of which they are not aware of, including the powers they have over their resources. So this issue of this biocultural protocol triggers those discussions and the better understanding of who the communities are and what their rights are. This biocultural protocol is adapted in its local context because each community has its own dynamics. In other words, there is no one size fits all. Each biocultural protocol will be adapted in terms of the community dynamics as it is developed. It is determined by a self-defined community with a close connection to a specific territory or area that is the foundation of their identity, culture, language, and their ways of life. So it's not going to be a cut and paste exercise. Each community will have its own self-defined biocultural protocol according to its own identity. It will have to be documented, developed, and used in a participatory manner, and where appropriate, with the support of trusted and long-standing organizations. That is where that is appropriate, because the communities are also granted a situation where they will have to consult with those people that they trust so that they can help them in documenting and developing their own biocultural protocols. It's also intended to promote appropriate recognition and support of community-specific needs, their customary ways of life, stewardship of their territory or area. This is also must be based upon values, standards, procedures, rights, and responsibilities set out in their own customary laws, including the national and international law. What is biocultural protocol not? It is not determined or defined by an external actor, such as government officials like ourselves, researchers, business people, or consultants, and which means we are not going to prescribe what needs to get into the biocultural protocol. Even us as government, we don't have that role. Our role as government is to facilitate. It is not a situation where it must be a top-down or prescriptive approach. The communities themselves need to be given an opportunity to define themselves and express themselves in a way that suits that community. And it also doesn't guarantee, the biocultural protocol does not guarantee that the community will grant access to the third party. If the community doesn't wish to involve the third party in the activity planned, then the right is with the community to deny or grant. It is not a tool that can be used to undermine or hinder values, standards, procedures, rights, and responsibilities set out in customary national and international law. In other words, this biocultural protocol should not undermine the values of the community. It is a framework that must be worked around the values of the community. I'm going to continue here as I go towards closing my part of the presentation. And these slides talk to how the communities are going to use their protocols. They are going to use them in influencing national and international agricultural laws and policies to recognize livestock keepers' rights and farmers' rights. In other words, much as we do have international laws that are in place, these biocultural protocols are intended to influence those protocols that are already in place. It is going to assist the communities to clarify terms and conditions for engaging in market-based mechanisms, such as payment for ecosystem services, access and benefit sharing, and reducing emissions from deforestation and forest degradation. They're going to use this in seeking support for customary livelihood practices such as artisan mining and fishing. It is going to be used as well to regulate the activities of academic researchers according to customary values. And this is, I've just summarized how the communities are going to use the biocultural protocols once they have developed such in their communities. Over to you, Chair. I think my part of presentation is over. Thank you.